Well, I'd like to welcome everybody this afternoon to a lecture by Youk Chhang. My name is Jim Glass. I'm a professor in the Department of Government and Politics and director of International Studies, one of the 12 programs in College Park Scholars. Before I introduce Youk, I'd like to thank Hoda Mamouni, who is the Bahá'í Chair of World Peace, for helping to sponsor this lecture. Also, Erwin Morris, the chairman of the Department of Government and Politics, and Marilee Lindeman, who is the director of College Park Scholars. So let me introduce this remarkable speaker, this survivor of the Khmer Rouge. Youk Chhang is the executive director of the Documentation Center of Cambodia, otherwise known as DC-CAM. You can certainly Google it that way. Also founder of the Sluk Reith Institute, which is an institute dedicated to the gathering of information and disseminating what happened during the horrible period of the Khmer Rouge, 1975-1979. Youk is a survivor of the Khmer Rouge's killing fields and was subjected to indignities as a young boy of 14 and 15. Indignities is not the right word: brutality, torture, and violence. Youk was born in 1961 and raised in Phnom Penh. At age 15, laboring under Khmer Rouge rule, he was arrested for picking up mushrooms in the rice fields to feed his pregnant sister. He was tortured publicly before more than 100 villagers before being dispatched to an adult prison without trial. He recalls, quote, months later, when I ran out of lies to tell to save my life, an older prisoner begged the prison chief to release me. The prison chief agreed, but I later learned that the older prisoner was killed in exchange for my freedom. I lived and he died. I do not remember his name, but have been searching for his surviving relatives to pay respect to them for what he did for me. I hope someday I will find them, unquote. Youk later escaped the Khmer Rouge killing fields, moving to the United States as a refugee, but his experience of Khmer Rouge terror and loss of loved ones led him to a lifelong commitment to promote memory and justice in Cambodia. He returned to Cambodia in the 1990s to manage human rights and democracy training programs for the US-based International Republican Institute and assist the electrical component of the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia. Chhang became DC-CAM's leader in 1995 when the center was founded as a field office of Yale University's Cambodian Genocide program to conduct research, training, and documentation related to the Khmer Rouge regime. He continued to run the center after its 1997 inception as an independent Cambodian non-governmental organization. Among many contributions to truth and justice, he has testified before the Khmer Rouge Tribunal as a living witness to genocide, developed a nationwide genocide education program with strong grassroots support in Cambodia, and established the An Long Beng Peace Center to facilitate research and foster reconciliation. He currently leads DC-CAM's development of the Sluk Reith Institute, a permanent hub for genocide studies in Asia based in Phnom Penh, and works to advance DC-CAM's vision of a legacy of justice, legacy of memory and education, and legacy of healing. Chhang has authored several articles and book chapters on justice and reconciliation and co-edited the book Cambodia's Hidden Scars, Trauma Psychology in the Wake of the Khmer Rouge, 2011. He's executive producer of A River Changes Course, a 2012 documentary film about Cambodia's changing social, economic, and environmental landscape that won the Sundance World Cinema Grand Jury Prize for Documentaries in 2013, and other awards. He also produced the film Don't Think I've Forgotten, Cambodia's Lost Rock and Roll, 2014, which illuminates the culture that preceded and survived the country's genocide. Youk Chhang is a senior research fellow at the Center for the Study of Genocide, Conflict Resolution, and Human Rights at Rutgers University, Newark. He was a member of the Eminent Persons Group who founded the Institute for International Criminal Investigations in The Hague in 2003. In 2000, he received the Truman Reagan Freedom Award from the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation in Washington, D.C. He was named one of Time magazine's 60 Asian Heroes in 2006 and one of the Time 100 most influential people in the world in 2007 for his stand against brutality in Cambodia and elsewhere. He and DC Cam are the honored recipients of the 2017 Judith Lee Stronach Human Rights Award from the Center for Justice and Accountability. It's my pleasure to introduce Youk Chhang. Following the question and answer period, there will be a reception catered by the famous Mama Lucia's restaurants. It'll be from 3:30 to 4:30, and you're all invited to stay for some really terrific Italian food. Okay, Youk.
Thank you, Dr. James Glass. I did not expect this crowd when I was invited to come to the school, so a bit of a surprise for me. I will tell you a story, my own personal story, perhaps to provoke thoughts and lead to a Q&A. And feel free to ask me anything about Cambodia, about my works. You have heard the interaction, which is a little bit exaggerated. A lot of people helped the center. Like he said, you know, I was 14 years old when the communists come to the country. Cambodia, known to the world as two places, is the most beautiful temples in the world. You know, a lot of people visit the country these days, and also known as the killing field, where 2 million Cambodians was killed between 1975 to 79. A story that I want to tell you is about one of my sisters. I have 5 sisters. One of them, she's married, have 2 kids, and were evacuated to one of the provinces. Usually under the Khmer rules, sometimes you don't have food to eat for several months. You know, I mean, when I say no food to eat, no leaf, no rats, no snakes, no nothings. So sometimes people have to steal, you know, to live, to steal, to lie, to cheat, to point finger to others, to live, to survive. So my brother-in-laws actually stole a cucumber that were left in the kitchens, and later were found by the village chief. During the Khmer Rouge times, you know, stealing is a crime with death penalty. So what they did, usually when you commit such a crime, they torture you in front of the public crowds. So my brother-in-law was tortured severely that day. Hundreds of people watching, and my brother-in-law was a professor. So that night he died. I think he died because he was just so upset, you know, being tortured with in front of the eye of many people, so he died. So when he dies, the village chief still search for the rotten cucumber. You know, he want to find the evidence, where's the cucumber. So my sister was accused of eating the rotten cucumber. And she denied that she denies the accusation. But to prove that she did not eat the cucumber, what they did, they took my sister to a nearby hospitals and cut her stomach open, and she died. So when she dies, one of my nephew, who's just a little baby, you know, without breastfeeding, so he cries until he died. And 2 more. The other ones were starving because there's no parents, no food, and they died a couple of days later. But one survived. One of my nieces survived at the age of 5. So what we did, that we told her that nobody died. So actually my sisters, my brothers, and her sister and brother actually went to heaven. And nobody died, and they would return to pick her up later. And we lied to her, giving her a coconut shell bowl, you know, for drinking water. telling her that her parents left this behind. If you keep this, then it will return to you. So my niece stopped crying and believing that one day her parents would return to pick her up. My niece now 42 years old, married, has 3 kids, live in Maryland actually. She lives here. And she never returned to Cambodia. She refused to return because she wanted to believe that her parents are still there. So every Christmas time when her kid asking for her parents, she told the kid to email me in Cambodia to communicate to her parents in Cambodia. And I have lied to her when she was 5, and I don't want to lie to her kid again now. But it's so difficult every time when I receive a message from my grandnephew or grandnieces from Maryland, I find it difficult to respond because they want to know about their grandparent which is passed away a long time ago. My niece doesn't believe that justice can be done for what the Khmer Rouge did to her parents. She does not support my work. I spent almost 20 years to collect the evidence, try to bring the most responsible leader to justice, to educate the entire young population in the country. For my niece, it's illusion. My mothers, who now 89 years old, have things differently in comparison to what my niece is thinking or myself. After the Khmer Rouge, people who torture my sister actually found my mother and seeks forgiveness. He have returned with a basket of bananas, coconuts, and flowers, and apologized to my mother for what he did to my sister. And my mother have forgiven him for a long, long time ago. So you can see in Cambodia, this is what happened to a family. Genocide have divided us when we live under genocide, even when genocide collapsed. My niece and my mother and I are still divided on how justice is being done to my sister today. And that forced me, that inspired me, or that urged me to return to Cambodia to find the answer. That actually for my mother, I want to find the answer for myself, for my family. So I returned to Cambodia and began to document the crimes that have committed by the Khmer Rouge against the entire populations of Cambodia. In 1996, I decided to went back to a village where the crime took place against my family. Because then not only my sister was tortured, not only my sister that her stomach was cut open and she died, but I also was in prison because I picked mushroom from the field to feed one of my pregnant sisters. So I returned to the village in 1996. But this time I returned as Youk Chhang, the Director of Documentation Center of Cambodia, known as an institute that advocates for a process of justice for millions in the country. When I returned, I found all the prison guards who tortured me. They're now much older, and one had passed away. But this time I came as a research trip, so my staff conducted the interview, and I was there sitting, listening to the interview in that village. So the interview begins. My staff, 4 of them, have begun to question each of the former prison guards who tortured me about the life or what happened in that particular village 30 years ago. It bothered me because none of them lied to my staff. They were sincere, they were honest. They tell my staff exactly what happened. But I was very upset. I want them to lie. I want them I want them the way they tortured me 35 years ago. Brutals, means, no mercies. But they were sincere. They were sincere. So at the end of the interviews, I cut off the conversation and I asked a question to the 4 prison guards, and one of them is the father of a prison guard who tortured me. I said, "Do you remember me?" And people sort of, who are you? And we know you, Youk Chhang. I said, no, I lived here before. He said, really? I saw you from the city of Phnom Penh. I said, I live here during the Khmer Rouge time, but nobody remembered me, and I was 14 years old back then. So then I asked them, do you remember a story of a young boy that picked up mushroom and were tortured among all the villagers and later were put in prison? And suddenly they all remember that story, because in that village, any crime that you have committed, they tortured publicly, they call people court. So everybody knows. Imagine that someone tortured your kid, your brother, among all the villagers for such a crime. The feeling that you have at that time. That time when I was tortured, it was confusing because about this much of crowd were watching me being tortured. And I believed that my mother among the crowd, because you cannot disobey the rule when they call you to attend the court proceeding. So I was mad at the prison guard and my mother at the same time. I was thinking that why my mother didn't come out and protect me and beg for forgiveness. They may have forgiven because my mother was much older and she served the village chief, she'd been kind. But there's no sign of my mother came out and tried to rescue me from being tortured. So I was upset at both of them while I was in prison. Every night in prisons, they call it livelihood meeting, that you have to come up with a lie to live. You have to say something bad about yourself and you ask for forgiveness. The village chief would decide for you to live or to die that day. So every night you sit in a rows, everyone come up and say like, I miss my sister, that's a crime. Please forgive me. And then village chief would decide, okay, next time don't miss your sister again, you go back to the cell. So one day, like he said, I ran out of lie, because when you lie every day, you cannot lie, and you cannot use the same lie. If they realize you use the same lie, also you subject it for execution. So you have to come up with a new lie every day to live. That night, I ran out of lie. So I told one of the elder prisoners who's sleep next to me to help with a lie. So he decided to ask the prison chief to release me. I'm here now, so I was released. But they killed him in exchange of my life, of my freedom. So he died. So the prison guard whom that I met 30 years later, when I began to tell the story, that it was me, the boy that you tortured 24 years ago. Everyone sort of running around looking for coconut juice for me, looking for to buy some cake and ask me whether I want to have a good lunch in his village. It might be strange to all of you, but in our culture, it's a sign of apology. And I actually did not react what I should have reacted, so that then in response to that apology, so I have forgiven them. And so I returned, so they no longer a part of my life. So this is Cambodia, when it comes to reconciliation, is very, very, very personal. Sometimes it takes so much of effort, sometimes it takes so much of commitment and dedication to bring it closer to yourself. So at the center, I began to document the crime because through my research, actually my mother, and I'm not the only person who suffered by the regime, the entire country. And I have advocated a process of tribunal which established in 2006 in Cambodia. So our institute supplies the information to the tribunal. But during the process itself, that I faced a lot of challenges and a lot of mistakes has been made, which I want to discuss today. The interaction, the biography, usually beautiful, people do good things, but in fact behind it, there's so much mistake that I have made, that thing that should have been done better, things should have been done faster. Perhaps justice would have been revealed better for the victim. During the process of collecting documentation, I questioned myself, what if no tribunal? Because it's almost impossible to bring about a process of genocide tribunal which involves so many peoples in the country itself. So I thought about plan B. thinking that if there's no tribunal, perhaps education can be the answer. In Cambodia, there's 70% of people like him that born after genocide. There's 15 million populations in Cambodia, and it's about 70% under the age of 25. All of us either belong to victim or perpetrator in that country today. Among all these students, you can make the assumption based on the school that you visited. In Cambodia, there's more than 1,700 high schools in the country itself. If you visit a school somewhere in the village, in the former Khmer Rouge stronghold, you can expect that half of the kids belong to the perpetrator and the rest belong to the victim. If you visit a school in the city, you can guess that more than half of the kids is a kid of the victim and the rest belong to the perpetrator, and that is Cambodia today. So I thought about perhaps education can be a form of healing, can be a complementary justice to the process of tribunal, which from beginning we don't think that a perfect justice can be provided. So through documentation, I also approached the genocide education for the country itself. Excuse me. I'll just take some water. You can see some more photo. This is better. Documentation actually a political act. In Cambodia, if you look back 100 years ago, you have colony for almost 98 years. You have Vietnam War, you have Vietnam invasion, you have refugees. So, but why you only pick a piece of document from that particular period? So documentation was very, very political. And not a lot of countries support the process of documentation in Cambodia from beginning, only perhaps 10 years later. So besides tribunals, I also focus on genocide educations, which has been a compulsory topic for the country in 2007, only recently, that the government allowed the teaching of genocide take place in high school nationwide. And so, I thought by doing this would make my mother happy, because, I came to this work for her. I'm doing for my mothers. I want her to be happy mothers. She has suffered so much. She has lost her entire families, her brother, her sister, some of her kids, her husband, her parents. I usually encourage my mother to count those who live, but not those who die, because so many have died in our family. If you count those who live, I have a sister in Maryland and 2 in Cambodia and myself and my mother, that's it. But the rest is all gone. So, I dedicate these works for my mothers and all mothers who suffer under the Khmer Rouge, and I hope that the process of documentation, the process of justice, the teaching of genocide in Cambodia perhaps can be a foundation to help support everyone who suffer under the Khmer Rouge to move on and to start a new life in the country itself. Mistake that I made, for example, I want to address, people call it lesson learned. During the process of documentation, U.S. government actually was the only government who supported that process. It began from the U.S. Genocide Justice Act in 1994 and signed into law by Bill Clinton that allowed the State Department to allocate a certain amount of money that invested it in Yale University Genocide Research Group to establish documentation center in Cambodia. All other countries did not see this as a human rights issue or came to support, because they look at this as a U.S. responsibility during the Vietnam War. So it was very difficult to do documentation without political support, and I has been very negative. I took a lot of wrong position rather than try to educate the countries. I've been very negative to France, for example, which is I see France as the colony, to my country. So I failed to work with France. I antagonized Japan because I think Japan was not sincere when it comes to human rights education. I did not try to educate European from beginning, even though I believe that genocide is a human rights issue. So it took some time. So during the process of documentation, I made so much mistake in making a decision who I should work with. That's something you all should learn, in the future. It's that you need everybody support. You have to educate the international community. You have to work with everybody. Because genocide is a crime against humanity. But I made so much mistake and take much longer. Had I not made that decision, perhaps that the process would have been much faster. But I've been very personal. I've been very personal in terms of how I work with which country that I want to work with. I never expect Asian countries support, for example, because so much human rights abuse take place in Asia. So I did not engage. China was difficult, and Vietnamese was seen as the enemy of the country, for example. So political decision, politics is going to be one of any challenges for Burma, for Syria, for any post-conflict country who aim to document the history of the crime that was committed by a regime in those countries. So one mistake that I made is a political decision. So I would encourage everyone to be more open so that victims can be benefits from your works, so that things perhaps can move faster in terms of a process of justice that can be done much better. So I made several mistakes in the first challenges. It's called politics. But I try to make it up later. But I try to be nice, be softened, engage Japan. But sometimes it's you have to take a position. This is my defense. It's just impossible to work with Japan, to be honestly. I mean, in terms of human rights abuse, it's just sometimes you just cannot change a country. But most Europeans came in for support. But Japan later supported the tribunal for somehow. But that's one lesson learned, or one mistake that I made, political decision. Secondly, networking. Usually people are confusing between the past and present. I think one of the most famous quotes by the American Nobel Peace winner saying that the past is never die, the past isn't past. So people are confusing with the genocide is a past, and then today it's present, and therefore they don't work hard enough to find the interconnected between the two. In case of Cambodia, like I said, we have 15 million population, and all of us either belong to one side or the other. So would be an awkward position to talk about today without talking about the Khmer Rouge, or would be very strange just to talk about the Khmer Rouge without talking about the contemporary human rights abuse today. So they both are interconnected. So whoever can find that connection, I think that would be the benefit of the country at large. So for networking, it's difficult because people don't see Khmer Rouge is a human rights issue. People say Khmer Rouge, it's genocide, then it's not about human rights. And therefore, it's very hard to get network support to advocate a process for justice. From beginning, Cambodia, not a single institute in the country support a process of justice in the country because they think that the Khmer Rouge is the past. But yet, you have everybody in the country belong to one side or the other. But that's a mistake, sometimes for us that we have made. We think that we can escape history actually still right at home. So networking is difficult, and I failed to educate the networking. I failed to educate the people to understand rather than I went alone doing this. Went alone doing this from beginning, pursuing my dreams, my objective alone. Only 10 years later, people began to understand gradually and come in and show support. But had I negotiated, had I educated the public or the network from beginning, perhaps it would have been better. What if I engage everybody? What if I spend a lot of time telling, educating the networking that this is about human rights, we should come together, we should collect more documents, we should, before a lot of people have died or passed away, perhaps it would have been better. Perhaps the trial would have been started much earlier. And perhaps a lot of victims who pass away now have seen a process of justice before they have passed away. But I did not engage at all, so I went alone. And at that time, there's no model to look at, so I just do it based on instinct, based on sincerity, and do the best I can. So that in terms of networking, I also failed to establish from at the early stage. Last, that I also seen as a challenge, I make mistake also. I did not take any victim to work at the center at all, because I think that victim take a position, and my interest to know both sides of the coin. I want to talk to both victim, also the perpetrator. But if you take a victim on board, then they already have a story narrative and would not be so open to also engage the other side of themselves. So I only take students to work at the center. For the entire staff at my center, all are students who were born after the Khmer Rule. So one of the challenges with young people that because they don't know so much about the history, so it takes so much time of engaging, of training, of working with them, and it takes so much time to send them abroad to get proper education, you know, before they can really perform the work for a national interest. So I have spent so much time in working with the young staff, and none of the victims were present at the center even today. So you know, so those things that I think that if you do any documentation on your works, you should expect political challenges and network challenges, also resources, including your team member as well, that you have to think carefully that would help you to achieve your objective perhaps much better than what I did so far. So those are things that I can come with all the defense of all mistakes that I make, but you know, it's not the point. The point that those should have been done better in the process of documentation. So documentation become a tool and in transitional justice that bring about information or process that can help both a process to seek justice and a process to educate the publics. Also, you know, understanding also its justice, you know, in such a country. So that's what I has been dedicating my life in the last 20 years doing that in Cambodia, Documentation Center Cambodia. Basically collect all these pieces of information from around the country. There's millions of documents now at the center. There's thousands of massacres has been documented. There's prison sites. There's interview, hundreds of thousands of interviews. So you all who are interested in doing any papers, school paper on genocide, on contemporary human rights violations, on history, you know, welcome to use our resources for free. You can contact me. You can come to Cambodia. Anything that all are raw data, so all are welcome. We need people like yourself to analyze all this data so that we can understand better about why it happened in the country itself. So that's the work of Documentation Center Cambodia. There's a little story of myself about reconciliation from a family that still remain broken after genocide. That's a story of how I came to this work for revenge, but that I have changed after I met my former perpetrators. So we spoke a little bit at lunch today with Professor James Glass, the meaning of reconciliation from Cambodian perspective, how survivors live, how resilient play the important roles in moving forward for survivors itself. So those are scattered topics I just want to throw to the audience so that you can get a little bit here and there, and hopefully hoping that perhaps some of these topics perhaps attracted you and you can come up with the question. And I'm happy to answer rather than give a long speech, which is sometimes it's only one direction of the story itself. So I would end now and expect that you ask any questions surrounding the work of justice or tribunals, genocide education, or the legacy of my works, or my personal stories, my journey to Americas, or the question related to reparation, how the victim live and how the victim participate in the process of justice in the country itself. So welcome any question. Thank you. Yes. Go ahead. Yes.
Was there a lot of controversy? Was there a lot of controversy over your documentation work in Cambodia, and if so, how did you deal with that?
Well, I was accused of collecting the document about U.S. bombs and Vietnamese invasion. So very controversial from beginning. My founding director, Professor Ben Cannon, has been heavily attacked by a lot of people around the world. Like I said, you know, pegging a piece of document is a political act. So I was challenged. Why? So you have to take a position why. And my position was that the genocide in Cambodia was the worst human rights violation in the 20th century. So we have to understand it before we can move on to other topic, other issue that took place in the country itself. I've been also both accused and attacked. I got death threats almost every week by the Khmer Rouge side, and also accused by the victim side for not looking at other abuse that committed by the regime. So when I got both sides as such, I feel that I'm doing something right. So I just move on. I mean, you know, you have to take a position. You cannot please everybody. You have to believe what you do, and you have to question yourself why you're doing this when you pick a piece of paper. For who? So I ask myself every day when I pick a piece of paper about the Khmer Rouge atrocity, this is for the victim. You know, this is for the country to be reconciled. This is for the future. So I believe in it, so I've been doing it. And you know, if people don't accuse you, people don't criticize you, then they don't do their job. So you should take as it is. As long as you believe in it, as long as you're sincere to your work, then I think should be fine. So that's how I deal with it. And it was very difficult. It took me almost 10 years to really resolve that accusation, that the intimidation. For example, the Khmer Rouge would bring police or soldier and go to my sister and threaten my sister to tell me to stop doing research. You know what I did? I did not go to the embassy human rights for help or get a press release. You know what I did? I took the police and to go to their house too. So I knocked the door and I looked for their sister also. So I sent them back. You know, in 1996, accidentally I went to the same hotel with Ieng Sri, the Khmer Rouge leader, the same hotel. And I was told not to check in now because my room was given to the government official. So I want to know who's the government official who took my room. They said, I can't tell you. It's confidential. And later I learned that was Ieng Sri. Ieng Sri is second most responsible leader of the Khmer Rouge. So I called him. I called him from the front desk. I said, look, you took my room. He said, well, you know, I was giving the room. I said, can we meet? And he said that he's busy. Why don't we meet in the morning before he return to his base? So 6 o'clock I woke up and he said, why you want to see me? I said, I want to take photograph, you know, photo opportunity with one of the Khmer Rouge leaders. He said, okay, do it in the morning. So 6 o'clock when I woke up and waited for him, he already left the hotel, and he left me a message saying that if a brave man, I should go to his base in the Thai border. You know, in our culture, it's a threatening, also it's intimidation, also it's condemning that you are a coward or something. You know what I did? I spent $1,500 US, rent the government helicopter and flew there with a pilot. I flew to myself. People at Youk were scary, you know, people were panicked that I went there alone. So I went there and I carried a bunch of documents and I met him. I just landed and I walked to his house. I said, I want you to confirm, is it your signature on this document? Is it your name? Because I brought a lot of material. And he was kind of a little bit surprised. And he said that, well, I'm busy. If you want to talk to me, stay overnight. So I was a little bit not so sure, you know, spend overnight in the Khmer Rouge jungle alone. So I flew back that day. And then he began to attack me through the press, through telephone. And I just took the way he threatened me and send back to him. If he threatened me by telephone, I also telephone him. If he threatened me through the press, I also write to the press. So I do the same thing. So it took 10 years. It took 10 years to solve that problem. And it took 10 years for me to also educate the European country to really believe that this is about human rights, because Cambodia was touched by Vietnam War, and they see this as American mess. It's American responsibility, and therefore they don't come near at all. Even if you told them that we lost 2 million lives in Cambodia, it took 10 years. So it was a long. You have to have a lot of patience, and dealing with the official, it takes much more patience, and you need political support. You need the government support to do the work. So, and the government change, there's always new official all the time, keep changing, and you have to continue to educate a young official all the time. So I fight back. For me, when I take this job, I'm willing to put my life, in the front lines, and I depend on God to protect, God is my life insurance company, so I don't buy life insurance company, I leave it to God. So human rights, when you deal with human rights, you don't run away from the perpetrator, you face them. If you run away, then you don't do human rights work. If you go to the press release, you don't do human rights work. To me, I don't do that. If someone that if the perpetrators that you are investigating, attacking you, you fight back. Otherwise, you don't do human rights work at all. So that's my experience. I have seen people who run away, but they being threatened by the suspect, by the perpetrator. It is not working. You keep engaging. It's nothing, So when you decide in your lifetime work on human rights, I think twice. You have to go that far to be to success. Next question. Yes.
Do you think there's what's almost like the biggest human rights violation going on today that isn't receiving enough attention? Like, do you think there's an issue going on that we aren't paying attention to?
Well, I believe in documentation. You cannot just say it. You have to document it. You have to find the evidence, and someone got to do it. I don't support any human rights abuse at all, even before or now or in the future. But you cannot just say it. You have to document. You have to prove it. You have to. In a country like that, usually human rights abuse take place. Usually, it's very political. Usually in a post-colonial society sometimes, but you need to use research base and document it. I think that's what you need to do. You cannot just say it. I also work in Burma, Iraq, and Syria. You always can say it, but then you need the evidence. And again, when you collect the evidence, you're not a court of law, so you have to know how to collect the material for the court of law. So it's another step, even before you reach out to a conclusion that someone is a perpetrator or human rights abuser. So there's a lot of patience need to take place. In Burma, I worked with Burma for 15 years, and I told them that all this information, you want justice for the future court. But if you collect material and you start to analyze it and you start to use it and publicize it, then you contaminate it. And by the time Burma is open and can advocate such a process, you don't have any evidence at all, because all can be challenged by the defense. So it's been a problem in many countries when a country that have human rights abuse, but you don't know what to do about all these things. For me, it's documentation or research based, and you have to collect it, and you have to turn it to a court of law. And you have to understand what kind of crime that has been committed, and to find the appropriate venue to turn in your material to that venue to address it. Otherwise, you got so frustration. In Cambodia, there's a lot of issues taking place, land grabbing, deforestation, things like that. But you need documentation. You cannot just say that someone took away your land and then what is next? Then you will lose the case. So I would suggest, people say, oh, why don't you work on the crime before the Khmer Rouge, after the Khmer Rouge? Even the Khmer Rouge itself, it took Professor Gregory Stanton almost his entire life. It's still not yet done yet, so I'm only not even halfway. So someone got to commit to a certain specific issue and commit it and dedicate to it and do it properly. It can be done. It can be done. Almost any crime that have committed around the world, if you do it properly and you have learned a lesson and don't repeat the same mistake and be objective, it can be done, and we can make a better world. If you really believe in it. And you have to ask yourself why I'm doing it for my mother, so I really believe in it, because it's for my mother's. I cannot lie to her what I'm doing. So it worked that way. But if you do it because you just do it, or interested to do it, then you should not complain if it's not successful. You need a lot of commitment to do it. I think it can be done. I believe in it. Yes?
Does your niece think that there should be like another kind of action being done with the actions that have happened in Cambodia? Like, does your niece not, why does your niece not agree with your work?
My niece?
Yes.
You know, she grew up in the States. She arrived here at the age of 6. You know, the boat that we gave to her, that we lied, that left behind by her parent, now in the safety boat in the Bank of Maryland. That value for her, that's her parent, that coconut shell, you know, that's become that value. She keep it at the safety boat in the Bank of Maryland today. For my niece, I dare not to ask even a question. I saw her every trip I come, but I never asked. Never, not even a word. I feel that, you know, this is very, very difficult. I do all these things, I talk to you, but I never talk to my own family member. It's just difficult to talk to my mother today about what happened, or to my own niece today. I saw her last trip, nothing. Oh, I pretend not to ask anything. It's heartbroken, you know, genocide, they divide you. It's how broken it is even after genocide's collapse. I cannot find a word to ask her a question why. My assumption can be wrong, what I think of her today, but I dare not even to ask her a question today. Recently, one of my sisters died of breast cancer. She's deaf. I know sign language since at an early age, and I'm the only one in the family can communicate with her in sign. But I never asked her until she passed away, until she was about to pass away. She was, you know, in chemotherapy, and we found one of the American Fulbright scholar, Erin. She's also deaf. She saw the article that I wrote about my sister. She got a scholarship and went to Cambodia, conduct research on deaf people under the Khmer rules. And my sister became one of her interviewees, so they do sign together. And my sister is a painter, and she painted a lot about her life, but I even dare not to look at the painting, because my sister, much older than me, she was 18, and she was alone during the Khmer Rouge time. She was separated. I don't want to imagine anything that happened to my sister at all. So I never asked her even a question. She passed away 2 years ago. I live with regret today, not to ask her a question. But it's difficult. What if I learned that my sister was arrested? What if I learned that she was in prison and she's deaf and she's a woman? I don't want to know. Sometimes not wanting to know also, it helps you to bring her closer to yourself. The same thing with my niece in Maryland. I dare not to ask a question. What question should I ask to her? Like, would you like to come to Cambodia, which I did. She said no. Then I would not dare to the second question, why not? I never even dare to go to the next question. I never asked. So I think that sometimes it's so broken, you cannot even find the small pieces to put back together. Sometimes reconciliation, I don't want to use the word naive or illusion, sometimes it's impossible to tell my mother to forgive someone who killed all her relatives and some of her children. Who do you think you are? To tell my niece that she should return, face the past, and reconcile and move on. She lost the entire family at the age of 5. I just can't do it to her. Sometimes reconciliation is impossible, but we have to make all effort to bring all these broken pieces together. My niece, all I can do, work with her kid, talk to her children, talk to her friends. Hopefully that would have some impact over her thinking. But so far, since 79, now 17, almost 36 years, she never returned to Cambodia, not even once, not even once. She refused to return, and all of my family members refused to speak, to ask her a question. When I returned to Cambodia for the first time, the family had a big dinner for me. And my sister, my three sisters, my mothers and neighbor were happy to see me return to Cambodia for the first time. During the dinner time, people start to talk about I stealing food. You know, Cambodia talk all the time. People always question, do you talk about the Khmer Rouge? We talk all the time. Then story came up that once upon a time under the Khmer Rouge, I steal food. And suddenly I got upset. I have grew out of this culture. You know, I feel that I brought shame to the family, so I told my mother, stop talking about that. And suddenly the whole room was silent. Until today, nobody in my family talk about me stealing food again. Today. And you know, living in a culture that's, even today when you tell a kid or your kid that stealing is the wrong thing, even if you can justify what you did back then, but you just can't tell the kid that you're stealing and you should be forgiven. It's just like you cannot find difficult, and you cannot blame the kid who were born after the genocide for their ignorance of what happened. So I told my mother, you know, stop. So I grew out of this culture, of my culture, that talking about bad things is also a form of collective or gathering in a family any longer. So my mother stopped. So now, when I met my mothers in Cambodia, it's no conversation. And that broken, yeah, went to that far. It broken until there's no way of repair. You know, I grew up in the war. I left alone by the family because I was a young kid. The Khmer Rouge came, it was separated. Then the Vietnamese came, I left the country as a refugee. I ended up in America alone. And I only returned in 1993, which is I was separate from my mother for almost 30 years. So when I met her, I wanted so much to be with her, but when you always forced to be separated, you resign to be with someone you love. You came to that point that even your own mother, you don't want to be with her any longer. Even if you are physically with her, you no longer have the emotion to really with her. And that is make me upset. My mother is a peasant girl. She grew up in the southern part of the country. And people in Cambodia, especially farmers, they believe in the dream. So my mother lived with her dream, believed her dream. And she told me not to worry because I always wanted to be with her. I'm the youngest son, but she also said, don't need to be with me because in my dream, you're supposed to be doing better when you separate from me. So she told me a story about her dream when she's pregnant. She said that she lost me in the jungle and she was crying, looking for me. And suddenly she found me on the top of the mountain and looked east. So in our culture, I would become somebody, but I cannot be with her. So her dream, it comfort her whenever I'm not with her. But I don't believe in the dream. I want to be with her. And every time I want to be with her, always something separated us. So for my mother, you know, she believed in it, so she prepared herself whenever I'm not around her in the last 30 years. So that genocide did to you. It's even that far, even broken beyond repair sometimes, even in your own family. And no one prevent me from being reconciled with my mother, no one prevent me from talking to my mother, but the shadow of genocide remains with us until you die in some cases. Yes, go on.
Do you think the advent of social media has helped people understand the reality of human rights violations, or do you think it distorts the reality?
I think the media play a very important role in informing the world about what happened. In my center, I have collected news about the Khmer Rouge genocide in 1960. So media have played a big role in telling the world what happened. And I think that's very significant. And I work with the media every day. I talk to every press, every TV, every reporter, because they are the messenger. They are the one who inform the world what happened. I think that media itself, have a very special role in genocide prevention. It also in intervention and also in the process of justice. And I think that I really appreciate the work by the media groups very much. In Cambodia, for the entire country. Without media, people would not know that the trials taking place, that what happening at the tribunal every day. I mean, the media is very critical. They are like to criticize, but it's good that you see the other sides of it. I actually want to become a reporter when I was young. I tell you a story. I grew up in Phnom Penh City, and one of my family members was the minister of the Khmer Republic. He's a spokesperson. He's a minister of information. So every evening, all the reporters come to my house and speak English. And I was like a little boy, like 7, 8, 9 years old. And I was inspired by 3 Western women who's a reporter and speaks English. And I always run and buy beer for them and keep the change. And one of them by the name of Kate Webb. She was arrested by the Khmer Rouge in 1973 and later released. And she wrote a book called 22 Days with the Outsider. It's very rare. Anyway, so I always wanted to become a reporter. So when I arrived in the States, I went to school study journalism for the first year. And then I changed my mind. I thought, Jesus, why should I write about somebody else? Others should write about me. So I changed. so I changed the major to political science. I thought to myself, if I do something good and people would write about me, my mother would be proud of me. Why I should be getting a career that write about somebody else, So I changed, but I still love reporter press. I met a lady, Kate Webbs, in 2002. She actually worked with UPI based in Japan. So I write to her and I tell her how much that I love her. She's so beautiful. She's tall and slender. She's American. She carries a lot of cameras. And then she's actually wrote me back and she said, Youk, I'm flattering by your email, but I'm not American. I'm from New Zealand. So I said, oh, please don't tell me you're from New Zealand, you're American. Elizabeth Baker, Kate Webbs, Sylvana Ford, there's 3 women, was the war correspondent in South Asia, is well known to everybody in Cambodia, and 2 of them still alive today, and 1 passed away. Kate died a couple of years ago. So I think that reporter is very cool. And at my center, we still collect news that read by reporter every day too. So you can see what people write about the genocide from different newspapers, magazines, and clips. I think they're very good people.
How did the country kind of change as the communists came into power when you were young? What did that feel like?
Well, I was 14. I don't even know who's a communist, what a communist is all about. When they came, I was home alone. This is another story why I feel very angry with the communists. During the war, there's a lot of chaotic in the city, always like shell, bomb, grenades in the theater. So my mother decided to relocate it because one of my sisters have a little baby, and hoping that to return and pick me up to join her, but then the road was blocked and the Khmer Rouge came. So I actually was home alone. What I remember when the Khmer Rouge came, it was very peaceful. Why? Because before that, every day there's always sound of the bomb. Every day, always shelling, always military running around, always gun. You can see on the sky, people were, the light from the airplane, that people drop the bombs, and sometimes across the river. So like noisy way of life for years and years and years. When the Khmer Rouge came, it was silent. It was very peaceful. It's just silent. Nobody talked, But then you see millions walk on the streets without even a word in communication at all. So I was confusing. I was 14 years old, alone. Everyone turned away from you when you seek for help. People were so selfish. Back then were greedy, were fear. There's an expression of fear in their faces. Nobody gave you any helping hands at all. So I basically depend on the Khmer Rouge to direct me to my mother's home village. So I walked. The country were completely, people said upside down. The whole city was empty. So I walked to the almost 100 kilometers to my mother's home village near the Vietnamese border, hoping that I will see her there. But when I got there, she wasn't there. She actually tried to escape to Vietnam, but then She was blocked and only returned to the village 4 months later when I reunited with my mothers. So when she returned, there's a, adult was talking why she takes so long for her to return to the village. And she said that she tried to cross Vietnamese border. And she returned because she couldn't cross the border, not because of me or look for me. You see the feeling? It's add up. Just add up. So the country was a completely different world. In the 60s, Cambodia consists of only, Phnom Penh city consists of only 300,000 population. And for the entire country, it's only 6.6 million people. So it's a very beautiful country, Cambodia. Very, very beautiful country. So things have changed. I spoke a little bit today that after genocide, now it's growing populations. Everybody in every sector in the country itself. Things have changed a lot. Only tree, only the landscape, some old building that contain all those old good memories in Cambodia. So, but things have changed. People move on with their life.
Could you say something about the decisions, the kind of decision making of the Khmer Rouge in terms of who to kill, who to spare, who to torture, how these decisions were made?
Well, I speak based on documentation. It's very hard to know what they're thinking. Now they are in prison, but they refuse to speak. So you don't know what is their thinking. But based on documentation, the first group that they were targeted was their own supporter. During the war, this is my personal explanation why we lose the war to the Khmer Rouge. Because during the war, the Republic government fought war. One side, they fight the war, and one side is of the supporter of the former Khmer Rouge themselves, the internals or spies of the government themselves. Because people think that the king would return. It's complex history. To simply put, that the Khmer Rouge did not trust its own supporter during the wartime, so they target this group. This is the first group they targeted, thinking that if they keep this group, then this group consider people with two heads, that they cannot be trusted. So those were the first target groups, their own supporters. So they killed them, and it was the dispute among the Khmer Rouge leader not to kill their own supporter, rather than support them and bring them to the circle. But the Khmer Rouge was split from the beginning, so they killed their own supporter. The second group was the military of the previous government, because there's a fear that people would resist using arms, because people think that people were hiding weapons, things like that. So then there was second group. And then they began to target intellectuals, because when you can think, that it's a threat to the Khmer Rouge. So they don't want you to think, they want to control your thinking. So intellectual group was targeted and began to eliminate it. And then their family member. That's why the killing is getting bigger and bigger, because they not only kill a person, but people associated with or related to the one that they targeted. And this is nationwide. So they start with their own groups, the military, the intellectual, the people from the city who associate with the previous governments. And then they began to target someone among their own groups. There's a Khmer Rouge policy saying that we intended to eliminate the external enemy and internal enemy. And external enemy, they refer to the Vietnamese, to American, to KGB. And internal enemy, they also refer to the way you think. If you think not revolutionary, then you also the enemy too. And that's why they have livelihood meeting every day for you to confess what you're thinking. They not only want to control your life, but also your thinking. And that's why the Khmer Rouge fell, because how can you stop someone from praying God? How can you stop someone from being loved? So the Khmer Rouge even gone that far to stop that. I think that's why they fail, because humans resist, even though it is emotionally, it's a form of resistance as well. When you love someone, again, the rule of the communists also is a form of resistance, and that it works. Sometimes you don't have physical to resist, but also emotion also can be a form of resistance. And a lot of people resist through emotion. People refuse to hate each other. People refuse not to love. People refuse not to be together. And that's against the Khmer Rouge, so we won. We won because that is humanity, that's belong to us, that's a God gift. And the Khmer Rouge cannot take it away from us. Is there someone here I forgot?
Oh, well, yeah, that was me. I was going to ask, you said the shadow of genocide haunts you and people that experienced it. How do you see it affecting the young generation of Cambodia today? I mean, do you see glimmers of hope in them? Or well, how does it overall affect them and the situation of Cambodian society today?
Well, we work with them nationwide, at least 1 million of them, because many of them have passed high school, so they never studied their own history. Among those 15 millions, only 1 million that we capture and provide this education to them. So this is, there's a hope for the future, but you have 6-7 million who passed high school already and never learned its history in their entire life. So that's why we have other programs to support. That's why media is important. That's why tribunal, museum, film, documentation is important to really try to fit in the knowledge of the history so that people can feel as a complete citizen and move on and contribute to the future of the country itself. When I meet young people who said, I don't want to know or I don't know, for me, I'm happy because they are young. I want young people to go to the mall, have girlfriends, boyfriends, buy CD, go to the film. They have to grow normally. I don't want them to grow obsessively about the Khmer Rouge or being obsessed about the past. So, people have so much expectation of the young population that they have to know the Khmer Rouge, that they have to be upset because their parents were been through the Khmer Rouge. I think we have to give them the freedom to grow. I was like him at that age when the Khmer Rouge came, and I want so much freedom to be myself. And I want the kid the same way. I don't want them have to experience the way I have experienced. And they will learn, I mean, like this kid, when they come to high school, they have to learn. It's compulsory. And we, as the survivor of the state, have the obligation to teach. But out of the classroom, it should be free. They should go to the mall, they could do something else. Learning history, not to be obsessed by it, to face it, but to be a better person, to become a filmmaker, a banker, a professor. I want that way. I think that's more healthier than that people have to know or have to appreciate it. I went to a high school and I brought a prison guard and a victim from the same prison to a high school like this. And I didn't tell the student that one of them is a prison chief. So we go there and we give presentation. This is high school, this classroom. And then people want to know about what happened to a victim because the victim was there. And then people start to ask about the Khmer Rouge. I said, well, ask this man, he's a prison chief. And suddenly the room was silent. Nobody asked this person at all, they always asked the victim story. I said, ask him, he's the prison chief from the same prison where this gentleman's parents were killed. Nobody asked at all. And then one student raised their hand. You know what happened in the classroom? Everyone clapped their hand. Victory, there's someone there to ask the perpetrator. But in fact, that student asking me about him, not even directly to the perpetrator. So we have the presumption that all the Khmer Rouge must be a bad person. The other side of it must be bad. So it's no question asked. But I'm interested to know why people join the revolution. And then I start to ask the student, have you ever heard any story from the Khmer Rouge from your parent? And suddenly everybody raised their hand. And one guy come up voluntarily and tell the story. I said, well, tell the class, what story have you heard from your parent? And he said that his father told him that during the Khmer Rouge time they were poor and no food to eat, and then his father knee bigger than the head because he was so skinny. The whole class was laughing because they thought it's funny. And the teacher got so upset. The teacher was screaming, "You cannot laugh at a suffering of people." Now, is it the right thing to tell a student not to laugh? Is it the right thing for a student to laugh? Because the story is so funny to them. You tell me. I think that's okay for them to laugh. Nothing wrong with that. But why we have to impose them not to laugh when they feel that they want to laugh? Why we have to make them to be upset with the suffering that we have been through? So I got into a quarrel with the teacher. The teacher said, "No, they cannot laugh because I was the victim. I was suffering. They should not laugh. Because they are young, they laugh because they are young." So I want the young people to grow that way. If I have the power, I would want every young people grow that way. But when young people go to school, you have to read history book for your entire life. And that, for me, that should be enough. And you can decide later, when you grow older, you can become historian, you can become professor, you can become what you like. I think that you have to free from being a victim in order to get back to the perpetrators. If you be obsessed by it, I think that you allow yourself to be a victim for the rest of your life. I don't want to be a victim for the rest of my life. So when I work with young people, you see in this, some people were chatting when we were teaching. They were eating food. I think some of them check telephone. That's okay. If they want to check the phone, some people listen. Some people do their homework. So that's okay. This one is checking telephone. And that's okay. Because they are young people, so they should enjoy life. So I see that way. So for me, Cambodia healthier the more I hear that people don't want to learn or don't want to hear this. Because genocide is there's no human language to describe genocide in words. You imagine that you don't have food to eat for several months. You imagine this. You have a dream that someone cut off your hand, your ear, take away your eye, cut your stomach open in your dream, and when you wake up, it's real. That is genocide. It's even that horrible. That's how I would explain genocide. It's like it exists in the dream, only in the dream, but actually it's real. When you imagine, I never imagined someone cut my sister's stomach open looking for a piece of cucumber. It happened. I never imagined 5 prison guards torture me because I picked up a mushroom. It happened. I never imagined that all my mother, family, brother, and sister were killed. It happened. I never imagined that only 5 of us survived for the entire generation of my family and my mother's family. It happened. I never imagined that Cambodian killing 2 million of their own compatriots. It happened. That is genocide. So young people cannot get that far. They're 14, they're 15, and you should also respect how much they can take, how much they can understand. So I would go easy with young people, and that's why I can work with them, because I'm very easy with them. I pass them all. Every year we have high school examination. There's only 4 questions for history, and they can get 15 points. I told the school principal, the dean, any answer that they do, give them, pass them. Anything that they write down to that question, pass them. Anything, sometimes the wrong answer, but at least they read the question about genocide, then I think they should get A immediately. So every year we have high school examination in Cambodia for high school to pass, and everyone pass because they read it. So I want to go that easy. I want to respect their freedom, the way they grow up, and I think that they cannot escape because everybody in the country were part of it one way or the others. It's just already heavy for them. It's so gray already for them. So you have to help them grow with imagination for their own futures and do things they like. because you're already surrounding them by all this horrible history, so they're too much already. That in case of Cambodia. Any more question? If you all, I don't know what major you're studying or maybe what year, but genocide is not just about crime. It's about art, about music, about education, geography, politics, social science, psychology, international relations, anything, Khmer Rouge is a country. So you can, if you're interested to write paper for your school, for your class, contact Professor James Glass or myself directly. We take interns every year. You can do photography. Photography major also can do genocide. You can film people in social media section. So I would encourage you to visit Cambodia, to learn about Cambodia, because it helps Cambodia to move on. Anything that you do, it's a help to the country itself. It's also good for you because Cambodia at the transition period. So it's a timing that all this data are still raw data. It is good for you to really study and understand, also help other country, also yourself. So it's good for both sides, for you, also for Cambodia. So everyone here, if you happen to be in a country or about to go to the country or want to go to the country, just tell me that you attend this session, then I would remember, then I would help whatever I can fit your, to make sure that you pass, to get good grade, and pass your class as well. So I would, if no other question, then I would end it now. And I thank you, Professor James Glass and Bahá'í World Peace. And I want to know one thing, Professor Gregory Stanton is the first person who established Cambodian Genocide Project in Cambodia in 1980. So he hears today when you have a chance during the snack, so I encourage you to speak to him and learn more about Cambodia. Thank you.